Alright guys, so in this video, I am going to be going over some of the buildings that survived the attacks back in 2001. You can see this little aerial shot of the map of what the World Trade Center looked like around the time of 2001, and obviously the entire World Trade Center was completely destroyed, although I guess that's not technically true. I mean, you had some of the smaller buildings like 5 World Trade Center, 6 World Trade Center. They were like partially destroyed, and then there was really no reason to salvage them, but that entire area was done. And then you also had the collapse of 7 World Trade Center. We're going to be focusing on the buildings surrounding that area. I did do a video recently on the forgotten buildings, like the church. The church was totally destroyed, the Orthodox Church. It ended up getting rebuilt. Also, the Deutsches Bank, that ended up getting destroyed. Or I guess it wasn't destroyed, it sustained heavy damage and then eventually was knocked down. It was declared unsalvageable, but we are going to be looking at some things that actually were saved. A lot of these things sustained damage and then eventually got rebuilt to their current state. And the first one, it is the Winter Garden. Now, the Winter Garden was located in the World Financial Center. It would have sustained damage from one World Trade Center or the North Tower falling. You can see it is a giant glass atrium, and it did have significant damage, especially to the roof of it, with a lot of the glass being broken out and a bunch of just the smoke and the dust and other debris raining down into it. But it was rebuilt extremely quickly, and it was able to reopen in 2002. Part of the reason it was able to be rebuilt, if you look at its location in relation to the World Trade Center, it really was off to the side in a completely different complex, the World Financial Center, which enabled construction to go on there very easily. It wasn't like it was right on top of the World Trade Center. They could fix it up relatively quickly, and they were able to open it as early as 2002, the Winter Garden there. The next one we're looking at, it is a surrounding building to the World Trade Center complex. It's best known as the Verizon Building, also formerly known as the New York Telephone Company Building. It serves as an office and residential building at 140 West Street in Lower Manhattan. It's 32 stories high and was constructed in 1923. At the time of the attacks in 2001, the building was undergoing a renovation. It was located adjacent to 7 World Trade Center to the east and the World Trade Center's Twin Towers to the south, and when the 3 buildings collapsed during the attacks, the south and east facades were severely damaged by falling steel beams. The collapse of the World Trade Center caused the partial collapses of some floor slabs near the windows, though the building as a whole was not in immediate danger of collapse. As a result, underground cable vaults belonging to Verizon, along with other underground utility infrastructure, were heavily damaged from water and debris because of the sprinklers and burst water mains. Although there were no fires, and I would say that's very key when it comes to a building like this. If you look at the 7 World Trade Center's fate with all the fires there were no fires, but the ground floor was significantly damaged by smoke. And they were able to save the building over the span of 3 years, the cost totaling $1.4 billion, but it was salvaged there. The next one we're going to be looking at is 90 West Street, also known as the West Street Building and the Brady Building. It is a 23-story residential building in the financial district of Lower Manhattan, located on West Street, just south of the World Trade Center. It was originally built all the way back in 1905, and the building was severely damaged during the attacks in 2001 when the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed 300 feet to the north. Scaffolding, which had been erected on the facade for renovation work, failed to prevent debris from falling onto the building. Debris tore a number of large gashes in its northern facade, including one gap between the 3rd and 11th floors. A firestorm continued for several days, and an interior light court functioned as a chimney, causing further damage to the interior. The West Street building's heavy building materials may have helped serve as fireproofing and protected it from further damage and potential collapse. The building was sold in January of 2003 and reopened as apartments in mid 2005. So that is another building located near the World Trade Center complex that was spared. And another building, or I guess this isn't a building, it's a bridge, but it is Liberty Street Pedestrian Bridge. The pedestrian bridge was over West Street along Liberty Street. Now, this bridge did sustain damage, but it was repaired and reopened in 2002 with additional work done in recent years. Its counterpart, however, was destroyed in the attacks due to the collapse of the towers, and you can see just some photos of it. It really does look out of place, but they wanted to save it based off of architecture. You know, this bridge originally going up well over 3 or 4 decades ago. You know, they wanted to save it as kind of a remembrance thing rather than get rid of it, because there were 2 bridges like this and one of them did survive, and there it is. And you can still, although, you know what? They might have repaired that, because originally they left some of the scars and some of the debris that had fallen on it just to kind of as a remembrance. I wonder if they actually did end up repairing that, but that is just another thing that was able to survive. You also have 90 Church Street, which is a federal office building in Lower Manhattan. The building houses the United States Postal Service, and you can see it also did survive, only suffering moderate damage during the attacks due to remnants of the planes and other debris landing on top of the building. Following the attacks, the building's facade was damaged, windows were broken, and the roof was seriously burned, with major water damage occurring throughout the internal structure. It was also contaminated with lead dust, fungus, fiberglass dust, mercury, and bacteria. The building was entirely engulfed by dust after the collapse of both buildings. 3 years later, in August of 2004, the Church Street Station Post Office reopened, and mail was once again being processed there. But guys, those are just some buildings that did survive the attacks. A lot of these buildings were damaged, but they were able to rebuild them, and they do look relatively the same. This is not like a situation where it's 3 World Trade Center, you know, they rebuild a completely different building. It's not even the same structure. These were rebuilt basically to the same, well, I wouldn't even say they were rebuilt. They're just repaired. Yeah, repaired is a better word, because the buildings look basically the exact same. And you can see, just going back to the aerial map, some of the other buildings surrounding the complex that also did survive. These are not the only like 4 or 5 buildings that survived. The financial center survived in general. Maybe I'll have to do another video talking about, you know, other buildings that also survived. And then if you even wanted to go further with it and said, well, did anything, any major structure, you know, internal thing of the North and the South Tower, did anything survive? Yes, the Tridents did survive, and people wonder, how is that possible? You would think they would get crushed like a bug, they would get pancaked on top of each other. Well, one of the main reasons you see them still standing there in the debris field, number one, they had the advantage of being virtually on the ground, so they had the support of the ground. And number two, the towers, especially the South Tower, because it was hit on the side, collapsed at an angle. There's actually a good video or a good angle of the South Tower collapsing, and you can see the exterior of the building inverting right where the hole was, and that's kind of the angle at which it fell, which also allowed at the bottom the Tridents to remain. If everything had just kind of pancaked on top of them, they very likely would have been destroyed if it had fallen directly down. But based off of the fact that the Tridents had the support of the ground, they could kind of weather, or I don't know what the exact type word would be. It's almost like, you know, you're getting something like you're ripping skin off the bone, but the chicken is still on there. That's like the idea. Like the Tridents are still, the facade is still there, but everything else is gone. Right, that would be the analogy I would use.